We're good?
Yes.
Okay, it is 12 noon. Good afternoon. Welcome. This is the Town of Southborough, Massachusetts virtual meeting of the Personnel Board via Zoom for January 13th, 2021. It is noon. I should mention that we have a member who is not present. Ms. Jasinski is not with us today. Meeting is called to order at noon. Thank you. I have been asked to read the following statement into the record. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Personnel Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at https://www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Thank you. The meeting is being recorded and all votes will be by roll call. All right, we're in section 2, administrative business. Just have one piece of business, approval of the minutes. They are in the packet at pages 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they were distributed before the meeting by packet, so reading is waived. Any comments, changes to the meetings? Mr. Rubenstein.
Yeah, there's one typo that I did see on page 1, starting on line 53. It says Ms. Jasinski would like to see use the year. And I think it was intended to say either see us use the year or just use the year.
I believe she said would like to see us use the year.
Right.
Thank you. So I will make that correction between see and use. I will insert us. Anybody else? Thank you, Barry. Great. All right. That correction having been noted, the minutes are approved by the chair as corrected, and I will post, actually, they're not called corrected minutes because they've never been posted yet. I will post the meeting minutes with that correction. Thank you. We're on to 3A, chair. I have just a couple of items under chair's report. First item is update on a couple of items that we spoke about last meeting that were tabled and that you didn't see on the agenda, and I'm sure you all wondered what happened to them. So Board of Assessors request has been tabled at the request of Mr. Sabelli. Mr. Sabelli informs me that the assessors are not ready to proceed with their request at this time. And I note the sad loss of longtime assessor Arthur Holmes passed away. And I don't know to what extent that has affected Mr. Sabelli's decision. But I didn't know Mr. Holmes, but I know his loss is deeply felt at Town Hall and particularly within the assessor's office. So condolences to his family and to the Board of Assessors, and we will hear from Mr. Sabelli in the future. Second item is an update on Board of Health hiring. You may recall at our last meeting, we met with the Board of Health. They talked about a couple of positions and the needs of their department for a public health director and a public health nurse, particularly in this COVID time. And I'm happy to report that that has been resolved, and it has been resolved under a statute that allows that board to hire and manage employees. And as a consequence of this operation of the state statute, it was felt not appropriate to go through the personnel board. That was my feeling and the Board of Health. So they are proceeding with hiring And I think Mr. Purple will tell us a little bit more about that hire under his report. But suffice to say, the Board of Health does not need the assistance of this board at this time. And the last item I had was a report on a discussion with Town Labor Council. So if you recall at our December meeting, we heard a proposal from Mr. Malinowski, member of the advisory committee, who encouraged us to take a look at vacation and sick leave under Section 11. And as a result of that discussion, this board had many questions, and we agreed in principle that some of these were legal questions. There's a policy aspect. Should we change benefits? But before we got to the policy aspect, we wanted to talk to town council who specializes in labor matters to understand legally what we can do. And that seemed to me to be an appropriate order to take these things. Before we have a discussion about what we should do, let's understand what we can do. Mark and Vanessa arranged a telephone call with Town Labor Council Tim Norris. That was last Friday. Thank you to both of you. And Barry was my +1 on that. It was a good conversation, honest conversation. We pulled out Section 11B and C, vacation and sick leave, asked a lot of questions, and it was agreed at the end of the call that it would be best for our board, before we proceed, to get a legal opinion in writing. So that was the consensus of Mr. Purple, Ms. Hale, Mr. Norris, and Mr. Rubenstein and myself. So to that end, Barry and I conferred, and we have sent a request for a writing to Mr. Purple and Ms. Hale to forward on to Mr. Norris. And we learned interesting things. Vacation leave is treated differently under the law than sick leave. Vacation leave is a little more sacrosanct. As we discussed, we cannot take away accrued vacation leave. However, sick leave is not privileged in the same way. So rather than get into a detailed discussion, my recommendation, I invite Barry to speak on this when I'm done. It seems to me that the subject of changing vacation and sick leave is it's an important one. It also implicates what we do for other employees in town. I think it's a bigger issue than what we're going to adequately get through in the month that we have before our changes for town meeting. So my recommendation to this board is wait for the legal opinion and then have a policy discussion about what we might want to do with these benefits for the following fiscal year. I just don't think there's enough time to adequately address. And Barry, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you've laid it out pretty clearly. And I think before we do anything, even after getting the legal opinion, there's obviously a financial perspective and also just a fairness perspective that have to be weighed. And there's no way we're going to be able to get that done in time for the next fiscal year. But I think as soon as we can, we want to start thinking about it, because we will probably want to give people as much notice as we can if we are going to make some changes to these policies.
All right. Mark and Vanessa, did you have anything you wanted to add about the phone call before we hear from other members of the board? Did I miss anything or?
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't think you missed anything. I think you characterized the phone call, the way it happened. Again, I think it's, you're correct in terms of the way that vacation is looked at versus sick time. I think that, obviously it's a benefit discussion, and it's, for SAP employees, and oftentimes that's used as the basis for discussions on union contracts as well. So I do think it's a decision not to take lightly, to Barry's point, that I don't know whether we have the ability or you have the ability to try and put something together cohesive enough to bring to town meeting this year. So.
Thank you. Was there a question from Mr. Nixon, or is this just
No.
a light show that happens on my computer?
No.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? All right, then I will bring Mr. Norris's opinion forward when we have one. And Barry's correct, there's a financial aspect to it, which is going to be a broader discussion. Mr. Malinowski had had suggested we could think about. I want to be careful to say he didn't suggest that we do. He suggested that we think about possibly alleviating some of this liability by a buy down. But from what I hear about the fiscal situation, that isn't something we should propose. A major buyout of benefits at this time just wouldn't seem feasible. So it's a big topic, and I look forward to getting through it with this board after we get Tim's opinion. So I think that's it for me. We're on 3B, Personnel Director Report. Mr. Purple.
Madam Chair, I think I'll do things a little bit out of order just to kind of follow with some of the things that you brought up in terms of Board of Health. So the Board of Health has approved some new contracted positions. The first one is that Mr. Pazinski, who has, and I would lean on Mr. Ballantyne and Ms. Hale as to how long Paul has actually been with the town and then retired and then come back. He has retired again as the health director, and he is now back in more of a consulting role with limited hours to try and help with the transition for the new interim director to get her feet under her. If I pronounce this incorrectly, Vanessa will fix me. Dr. Heather Alker is the new interim public health director. Again, different from Mr. Pazinski, whose focus was more environmental health. Dr. Alker is more focused and trained in public health, which is exactly what you need when you're in the middle of a pandemic. So she is just starting to get herself acclimated. She's 19 and a half hours a week and hopefully is going to bring good things to the town. So Board of Health has approved contracts for both of those positions. A new item that I just saw today is that Board of Health is going to be seeking additional funding from advisory. As I think had been mentioned previously, the public health nurse is going to be resigning next month. And when she does, the Board of Health would like to increase that position to full-time. We have confirmed through the town accountant's office, who is our conduit with CARES Act funding and FEMA, is that any additional hours beyond those budgeted would be reimbursable through CARES. So the $23,000, I believe, that Board of Health would be looking for to increase the position to full-time would be reimbursable through CARES Act. So we would be covered at least between now and June. I think the conversation is ongoing as to whether that position would remain full-time beyond June 30. That's a budget discussion piece that's still ongoing. So I think that brings you up to date on Board of Health if anybody had any questions. I'll take the silence as a positive. The second issue is just to update you on the IT manager position. We had a brief, that was the Zoom that started the day off this morning. The Cliff Note version is, it's still in process. We had one candidate who came forward and withdrew from the process. We were continuing to review the pool, and if we can move forward, we will. And if not, we'll have to extend this process a little bit longer. In the interim, the school, and my appreciation to Superintendent Martineau, the school is providing coverage for us on IT with some of their IT team members who's helping to monitor our help desk and providing help to us when we need things. So I do appreciate that. So it's a real important time. It's important anyway to have good IT people in place, but we need to make sure we get the right person. And so I appreciate the school helping us in that regard. The last issue, I always save good news for last. I did want to recognize Mrs. Hale, who has been recognized and is the recipient of the 2020 Leadership Trailblazer Award, which is a national award which recognizes her public service and support of women in the field and promoting women in the field. This is the first time that I'm aware of that someone in Massachusetts has gotten this award. I'm aware of one other manager who made it to a finalist, but never been awarded. Vanessa was chosen out of 10 national finalists for the position. And I'm not going to go on and on because it looks like her screen is frozen. And I know she didn't want me to do this, but it is, a great recognition, of the work she does. I know that she, she's big on trying to push training opportunities and opportunities in general, but she does try to make sure, her efforts, promote women in the profession and in municipal government, especially her work through the Mass Municipal Human Resource Committee. So kudos to Vanessa. And given that's a personal related issue, I thought you should be aware. So that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
absolutely.
Purple. A little bit, I hadn't heard about the award. So Vanessa, is this based on your work in Southborough, your work through the Massachusetts Municipal Employees Association, or a combination of both?
It's a combination of both. Ms. Rosenberg.
I think it's a recognition of, her body of work in terms of municipal. So it does go beyond Southborough, and it's her professional associations and everything. So it's, it's like a recognition of everything she's done to date. Hopefully there's more to do, so I don't know if you can win a second time, but, kudos for the first time.
Thank you for sharing that, because we all know Vanessa is pretty humble and wouldn't share that about herself. So thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Purple? My only note is keep us apprised on the IT manager. If there's a vacation issue, shoot us an email as per our previous discussion. And if there's a salary issue where you feel that you need to go above midpoint under 9C, send an email. One of the upsides of the Corona quarantine is that we're available for meetings on shorter notice. So if you should need a salary ruling from the board, just keep us posted. I know
Absolutely.
that
Thank you.
All right.
I think I just had one quick update on
Sure.
the IT based on our conversation this morning. I think that we'll know definitely by Tuesday or Wednesday if we're feeling like we need to repost the job. And then we'll be we would love to have Jay take a look at our job posting if he's willing to. We are thinking we need to change that up and make it a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, I do know that just to that point that Vanessa made, I do know that Matt Probst, who is the chair of the technology committee, he has been really instrumental, and we appreciate his efforts in being involved in all aspects of the hiring process and the interviewing. He's really put the candidates to the test in terms of the technical abilities. But he had offered a couple of ways to, from a technical point of view, what some of the IT people may look for in an ad, of maybe tweaking the ad as well. So I think between what he may do and what Jay could add, would probably, make a better ad if in fact we have to go back out.
Well, if you need somebody to test the candidate's ability to explain technology to someone who is not smarter than a third grader, feel free to have them contact me. Because if they can make me understand it, anyone in town can understand it. So you can use me as your floor for understanding.
We may take you up on that.
Yeah, Matt Probst is at the ceiling, and you can have them see if they can explain how to manage email to me, and then we'll have the right candidate. All right, thanks very much. So normally we would go to unfinished business because it's unfinished. Do we have Tim Davis in the wings? His
We
is
do.
very quick. So
Yep.
with the board's indulgence, I think we'll go to 4A, because we shouldn't have much to discuss on recreation. And then before we get to the bylaw and those internal matters, the fire chief may be standing by with his new business. I would take care of those two departmental requests and then get back to our business. So good morning, Mr. Davis.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Good after. Oh yeah, good after. We used to be morning. So you have in your packets starting at page 8, board. If you'll recall, December 9th, everything was in order, and we just asked Mr. Davis to come back when the Recreation Commission had approved his schedule and job descriptions. So the packet was a little bulkier maybe than it needed to be because we included all of his job descriptions. but all that remained was for his board to approve it. You can see that they did in fact approve it. So it's up to this board to accept the schedule and the new job descriptions. But before we do, we can open it up. Are there any questions that you didn't have the first time around? Anything noted, board members? All right, then, Tim, I just noted on one of the job descriptions, Tim, it's the program instructor job description. It's in the packet at 22 and 23. It looks like this one, the footnote didn't get updated when it was approved.
Yeah, I just, Vanessa caught that too before this meeting.
Okay.
So I think I just sent you the wrong file, so I apologize. But
All
that
right.
was voted on that December 11th date. So that's been adjusted on our side in our system.
Great. I don't think there's any reason to hold you up in that regard. All right, so the chair will make a motion to accept for inclusion, to recommend that town meeting accept a revised Schedule F as presented in the packet of January 13th, 2021 at page 9. Do I have a second to accept Schedule F?
Second,
All in favor? This will be by roll call. Mr. Dietz?
yes.
Mr. Nixon?
I have to recuse myself in as much as I'm on the Recreation Commission.
Accepted. Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes,
Ms. Rosenblum votes in the affirmative. So this Schedule F will be included without the footnote in the revisions for the warrant for town meeting. All right. And then as far as the job descriptions are concerned, if we could substitute the program instructor job description with the date of approval as for all the other ones. Chair makes a motion that the Personnel Board accept the job descriptions in the Personnel Board packet from January 13th, 2021 at pages 10 through, pages 10 through 26, with the addition that Ms. Hale will add to the footer the date of approval of the Personnel Board as of this date. So I know that was a long email. Approving job descriptions with a change in footer. Second to the motion?
second,
All right, this will be by roll call. Mr. Dietz?
yes.
Mr. Nixon?
Yes.
Are you absenting from?
Yeah, I think I have to abstain from that also.
That is a personal choice, Mr. Nixon, but it would seem consistent. So,
Yes.
All right. All right, thank you. Mr. Rubenstein?
Yes,
Ms. Rosenblum votes yes, so the job descriptions are accepted. And on behalf of the board, thank you, Mr. Davis, for your hard work and for working with us over a period of considerable time to get Schedule F right. So we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate
All right,
the
thank
support.
you.
Thank you very much.
All right. So normally we would go to the rest of our unfinished business, which is the bylaw and the Personnel Board budget. But I would, if Chief Achilles is waiting, I want to be mindful of his time. So let's skip to 5, new business. Chief Achilles, welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Nice to see you. So we are at board packet pages 56 and 57. So we have a proposed new Schedule D, and I want to thank all these department heads who are coming in and doing our job of revising the schedules for us. Because part of the mission of this board is to review the classification schedules, and with help of our department heads, we are getting it done. We just got F done, and now we'll get D taken care of. So thank you, Chief, for these materials.
You're welcome. I can explain the intent, and then I did forward an Excel spreadsheet that I would like to kind of walk through just to allow an overview of what we're looking at, and then answer any questions if that works.
Okay, before I give you the floor, Chief, I'd just like to ask all board members to turn to page 57. You'll see that there are 3 tables. One is complete Schedule D. If you would label that 1, and then going down the page, proposed revisions, label it 2. And emergency management coordinator stipend, label that 3, just so we're on the same. And then across the page, if you will go to the top of the page where it says current PT drills and label that A. The next column moving to the right, current PT recalls, B. FY22 full-time step 1, if you would label that C. The next column would be D, and the last one would be E. Just so when we reference something, we're all on the same page. Great. Chief, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, board. As part of the fire department, we have a number of employees that are what we call the call members, but they are technically part-time employees, which follow the personnel plan. These members supplement and support our emergency response. Typically, in the old days, they were called volunteers. They don't have any set schedules, but they play an important role. And as fire chief, it was one of my goals to strengthen the call division so that we would have a good level of reserve capacity, which has proved extremely important this past year. So the request was to remove the current provisions of Schedule D, except for the detail language, and replace it with what I'm presenting as a following structure. And that will basically get us to that information that I provided. If you were to look at one, the current complete Schedule D, those in column A are all the current positions and what they receive if they come back for training. And again, we do one training a month. It usually lasts 4 hours. We're doing one tonight. So those are all the positions and what their hourly rate, and they get paid by the hour to do what we call drills or training exercises. The next line, which is 1B, current part-time recalls, I don't know why there was established a difference, but this is actually coming back for emergencies. So I don't prescribe that they should get paid less to come back for an emergency than they do for training, but that was the difference. If you looked at 1C, our full-time members, there is a schedule in the permanent firefighter contract for full-time members, and when they have 7 steps. So when they're new employees, this is their hourly rate in column C. So you can see that our part-time members doing the same work, there's a disparity of pay rates. So, and in column D of 1, they do receive, our full-time members receive a stipend for advanced training. So I just want to add that in there to show that the true hourly rate is different for a full-time member. And column E is just the difference. So looking at 1 in its entirety, it was important for me to look at how do we provide consistent, comparable, and to the responsibilities of our part-time members to that of our full-time members. Also, make sure that we align the positions to what our operational system is now. So I can tell you in the current complete Schedule D, all those positions aren't really consistent with how we operate now. So that's where the proposal in 2, proposed revision to Schedule D, we updated the positions to reflect what we currently do. We also added a position so we can encourage citizens that want to become members, that don't want to really embark on taking a big leap to be an emergency medical technician, but what's called an EMR or emergency first responder, what could they do to technically be members of the department? Again, ultimately, and I want to focus on the proposed rates, and that would be in 2 in column E. We revised the rates that we felt were appropriate for part-time members or these call members that would make them more comparable and consistent with their responsibilities and how we operate. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Chief. Comments, questions for the chief from the board members? Anybody?
Well, so I'm trying to sort of get my arms around, obviously, as you said, the current schedule doesn't reflect how you operate. And I'm just trying to sort of compare jobs between the current schedule and what you're proposing. So a firefighter 1-2 paramedic in your proposed schedule, what would be the comparison in the current schedule?
So unfortunately, when this Schedule D was established, and I think it was in 2004, they didn't really identify paramedics at all. They had, and you could see in number 1, complete Schedule D, there's no paramedics. And I think the intent back when this was established was to try to get some of the part-time or call members to get more training. It might have worked back then, but I don't think it doesn't reflect our current positions. So it would be something new that reflects how we operate now.
Okay. And the amounts that you're recommending, did you do some kind of survey, or sort of where did you come up with those numbers?
Because it really, what the method behind this was not to try to attract, we're not having a recruitment issue, but these numbers line up better to what a first step full-time member makes. So it was really to try to make it a comparable and consistent to the schedule of our current full-time members. Not to, like in other part-time jobs, trying to attract and make sure it's a market comparison. And you can see that they're all a little slightly under, or they're under what a full-time member would make, but just, especially when you start getting up into the more advanced and more credentialed part-time member, they would see a little bit more increase than they're making now, but it's still a little bit less than the full-time member. So it's almost, and here's an interesting point. We have a vacancy now where a call member who's getting part-time pay is interested in becoming a full-time member. So showing some comparable would make sense, but also our part-time members can, on occasion, if a full-time member is not available, fill a shift on duty. And I just thought that I don't think it was appropriate to have a truly different pay rate for doing the same work.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else from the board? Comments or questions for the chief? Okay, I have a couple. When I first looked at this, one of my first questions was, when is the last time that these pay rates have been raised? During my tenure on the board, I go back to 2017. We have looked at Schedule A and Schedule C, and we have raised those salaries, I think, but 2%. My first year, we captured 3 years at once, and then the next year. So I think maybe average of 2% just during my tenure. So I asked Vanessa, Mark, Brian, and the answer that came back to me is the schedule that is in the FY21 SAP is the same as the 2004 SAP. These salaries have not gone up since this schedule was instituted in 2004, correct? Okay. What I don't know is how much Schedule A and C salaries have gone up during that time. Do they go up? And maybe we need to hold off on a decision if this is relevant to other people. It's relevant to me that Schedule D has lagged behind Schedule A and C, but I don't know how much. I do know that the Schedule A and C salaries just during my tenure that I have knowledge of have gone up 8% at least. So my question is, how hard would it be to find out how much Schedule A and Schedule C salaries have gone up? Because that to me, unless I'm missing something, would be a baseline. So if the Schedule C and A and C had been raised 2% a year since 2004, this seems a little bit like a no-brainer if the numbers add up, without even going more into the chief's professional judgment about what's appropriate. So does anybody know if the Schedule A and C salaries went up between 2004 and 2016 before I got on the board? That's something that can be ascertained.
Yeah, but unless you have a sort of an estimate in your head, we would just need to go back and look at the charts that were identified in the town meeting warrants and look at how the numbers changed. But I'll defer to Brian if he has kind of an estimate.
Yeah, I think they did go up, Vanessa, if you remember, now we're going back to the history, but I
Yeah,
think they did, but it's a good question. It's definitely a good question. So I don't even want to try to guess, but we can get that. We can actually, we can get that.
Great. So as a threshold matter, I would ask the board to ask their questions. We engage with the chief. One of the issues that has come up about the jurisdiction of the personnel director, and I don't want to get too esoteric, but this bigger picture of who does what. One of the things we agreed on, and the board has been doing this practice all along, but most recently I agreed to it when I spoke with Mr. Healy and Mr. Purple on behalf of the board. So the deal is you have departments within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen and those without. So fire department within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, library is an example of those without. In each case, when the department head has come to us proposing a change for the SAP, we've always asked whether or not the governing board has approved it. So when Mr. Donovan comes before us to do something with the SAP that has budget consequences, we say, has the library trustees approved it? So as I explained to Chief, when he first told me he wanted to propose this, the first thing that I have promised Mr. Purple and Mr. Healy is that I'm going to ask, have the Board of Selectmen approve this? And usually a lot of these budget questions will get teased out during that process. When somebody comes to us for approval of something, they usually know an estimated cost of it, and they have the types of information that I'm looking for because they've already gone through a layer of scrutiny with their governing board. So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to refer this back to the chief, and he can come back to us in 2 weeks after the Board of Selectmen has approved it. But I'm correct, the Board of Selectmen has not entertained this. You're here first, Chief, and then you're going to go see the Board of Selectmen. Okay. So the first question in the meantime, before you get to the Board of Selectmen, because I can't imagine they're not going to ask the same number of questions that I'm asking, is what are we asking? What's a percentage that we're asking these salaries to go up? I haven't run the math because I wasn't sure what those column C numbers were. And thank you for addressing that. So just some simple math on how much is it going up over 2004 and how much have the other salaries gone up? Because I think that could resolve a lot of questions in my mind. And I'm sure
If I may, Betsy, is I think twofold is one, these are already included in my proposal for FY22 budgets.
Okay.
And I know previously when we were talking about the deputy chief that it was who to go to first. So I thought it was more appropriate to go through this board first because it's in the SAP. And again, I will present it through the town administrator to the select board. I'm hesitant and I will do it if you wish, but I think this is very evident that because there's not been any increase since 2004, I cannot, if other schedules are up 15%, I cannot add 15. I can't exceed the number we're paying a full-time member. I just think that was not a good practice. if we were talking, these were updated in the last 3 to 5 years. I think that's a very valid question as far as percentage increase. I think this is 17 years. I think it's, to me, it's a moot point that what's the percentage they're going up. Knowing that the intent is to make sure they're consistent in comparable what we're paying people doing the same job full-time at an entry level.
Thank you, Chief, for your comments. I appreciate that. That was my third point. You stressed not so much that, so we hear from department heads who want to raise salaries to maintain competitiveness. In this case, your focus has been on full-time folks who are doing the same job in the union and parity. The issue for me as SAP chair, we don't have parity between Schedule A and Schedule C. So this is something we talked about with our town council and our consultant. It apparently has not been a focus of the law in Massachusetts unless things have changed. Parity is not a legal given, so it's for this board to decide as a policy matter if that is our priority. I appreciate you bringing it up in the context of D, that's your focus. And I don't know what effect this has on Schedule D, but there is no parity between A and C. So we have, for example, an administrative assistant making less per hour than their full-time counterpart. And that is not your concern, but that's part of the global view that this board has to take.
Understood.
So that's why I look at it as a numbers thing. If the numbers support your request and they haven't been raised in 17 years, and the Board of Selectmen does its analysis and says this is sound to us, that would be important for the board. I do appreciate your point that you wanted to come here to talk to us first because we own the SAP. As far as this having correspondence with the previous schedule, my personal opinion is the previous schedule is pretty old. It's not really even a modern schedule that speaks to how you run your department. I am not personally concerned, and this is not to suggest that anyone else shouldn't be, in finding correspondence between your positions and the previous positions. I don't know enough about the operations of a fire department to question how one corresponds. I take you on faith that this is the way your department should be organized. So as far as the structure and the job titles, I'm good with it. I wouldn't try to question those. As for the salaries, I would just want to know how they look as opposed compared with Schedule A and Schedule C. And I would want to know that the BOS supports this component of your budget.
Thank you.
But I would otherwise, in principle, be in favor of what you're proposing with a little more financial data. Barry.
Yeah, are there job descriptions for these new positions?
We are developing job descriptions for every position in the department. That we've just completed all the full-time members, and we would do the same for these.
Okay, I defer to the chair, but I don't know that we could or should approve increases for jobs for which there's no existing job description that we've approved.
I don't know if you have, I don't know if you have job descriptions for these positions currently.
Barry, I agree in principle, and in the best of all possible worlds, we would have shiny new job descriptions. But I've seen the existing job descriptions for A and C, and some of them are so old, and we've heard testimony that don't really even cover the job. So the existence of a job description doesn't necessarily sway me, because some of the job descriptions we have are, what's a polite word to say, really old and out of date. So.
But I am prepared to provide job descriptions for each of these so that in moving forward, the board and the select board and future administrations of the fire department have job descriptions for these.
Okay, it would make me feel more comfortable. I think it's consistent with what we did with the rec department when they essentially went through the same kind of thing. So, And I think it's consistent with what the SAP says. So I would feel more comfortable having those. I assume, you're the expert. I'm going to defer to you in terms of what they say. But I think just in terms of process, for me, it would be helpful to have those. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
If Barry Rubenstein thinks it would be prudent, then I think it would be prudent. I guess I just jumped a little ahead of where I was with rec, and you're right, Barry, we went through the same process with rec. Because it's public safety and we're in the middle of a pandemic, I maybe jumped the gun a little bit. So anybody else on the board have a comment?
I do, and my question is addressed to the chief. On the basis of the proposed fiscal year 22 increases, which shows the variation from current, you basically, you're proposing a flat rate for all categories, whether you're a firefighter 1 or 2, or a entry-level EMT or an advanced EMT. It would be the same base rate. And that's a little bit of a departure from how it was established before. In some cases, it's like a 20% increase to as much as 50% increase in some cases. And could you just give us a little insight into your thinking on that?
Sure. One, and I think I mentioned a little bit when we started, is I don't know why there was a difference in pay between coming for a training exercise and an emergency. That's why you see the recall under Schedule D. I think they might have called it box alarm, but it was recall to duty during an emergency was lower rate than if you came to training, which was scheduled. I don't agree with that perspective that you get paid less for coming in
Right.
in an emergency. Also, although full-time members get overtime for recall to duty, their hourly rate is pretty much the same. So there's no differentiating between coming in for a drill or training. You is a simple rate. And from a management and administrative standpoint, it is much easier budgeting and payroll to have one flat rate that you calculate than having multiple rates for the same person.
I think that answers my question, but it just seems that in some cases it's you're looking at an increase in some cases of $9.50, $9.60, and so forth. Is the sense that it's not just a question of increasing the rate, but that those current positions have been undercompensated for a long period of time? That's my assumption.
My assumption is the same thing.
Okay.
So just want to make clear, because I saw table 1, column E, and I went, wow, going up 960, 860. That's the differential between the current full-time.
Correct.
So,
And I must explain that in 1E, that's the difference between the full-time member and a part-time member. So that leads to what Mr. Nixon had mentioned is I think our call members were getting underpaid for doing the same work.
Right.
And again, this is entry-level firefighter. So if we hire somebody tomorrow for full-time, they're going to be making more than, which is understandable because it's a full-time job. But for the same work, I think I want to ensure we have some, and I know Betsy said it doesn't always have to be parity, but this is same work in the same department. I think there's, for a morale standpoint and to a retention standpoint, there is value to have some sense of parity. It doesn't have to be exact.
Well, I think it also makes a difference in the so-called esprit de corps. You know, how they feel about the work that they're doing and what they're being compensated for, and a measure of equality.
Correct.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just to be clear, I recognize that we do not have parity. It's not my personal opinion that we shouldn't have parity. It's just something I noted early on, because the Personnel Board reviews these schedules and makes recommendations, that we didn't have parity between A and C. So between full-time, part-time. So my first question to the lawyer and to the consultant were, is this legally required as a policy matter? Should we? And what I heard is, it is not legally required. And B, it is just not a focus of HR folks in municipality, in the opinion of that particular consultant, hasn't been a focus in Massachusetts. So now we're on whether or not it should be a focus and a goal of this board to provide parity. So thank you, Chief, as a department head. It's your professional opinion that, at least in the context of the fire department, there should be parity between full-time and part-time. So I guess where we would leave it is, I personally thank you for doing this. I support, in principle, revising Schedule D to make it work better for the fire department. I support the call of one of our members for job descriptions. I think that would be helpful in terms of being consistent with what we have done with other departments. And we could see you back here after you have a discussion with the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, and I do want to mention that with our full-time members, a firefighter, EMT, or paramedic has one job description, no matter what levels of EMS they provide. So when I submit this, and I'll go through Vanessa and Betsy, you're probably going to see one job description because that's how we categorize a firefighter that has EMT or paramedic status. We don't have multiple job descriptions for our firefighters. We break it down to firefighters, officers, administrative people. So I just want to make people to kind of forewarn that you're not going to get 7 or 6 job descriptions.
So Chief, how do we distinguish who is a $19 an hour EMT or firefighter one, what they're doing relative to the next level up, which is 23 or 25? How do you reading those job descriptions, how would we distinguish?
Through a job description, just like our full-time, you wouldn't. People, full-time members get a pay rate based on the credentials they hold or the certifications. So the same thing would happen is we would establish when a member started, we would look at their credentials and set the rate based on those credentials. So they would actually have to hold a paramedic credential to get anything that has a paramedic rate established.
So just to be clear, on page 56, your proposed table, you didn't include grades. So I think it would be helpful for us, given that all the SAP works on grades, if you would assign a grade to each one of these positions. And then in your cover memo, explain to us, so how many job descriptions? Let's look at page 56. You've got 6 different positions. I assume you're going to call them grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well,
How many job descriptions would we get?
the challenge is, are you thinking grades are a way to move up? So you go from grade 1 to grade 2?
No, I'm thinking that every other schedule in the SAP has grades. And that the one that you're replacing has grades. If you're telling me you don't want grades, then we could have that discussion. All the other well, not stipends. Stipends in E don't have grades, but A has grades, B is reserved, C has grades. D currently has grades.
I will try to make it as simple as possible. I just didn't want somebody to think that you start off at grade, the first lower grade and work your way up, because people will come, especially people that want to volunteer or be part-time. They'll come in with different credentials or at different levels. So I didn't want somebody to think that it was automatic. They went sequential through the grades. If that
Well-
helps you, I will do that.
Well, I'll open up to members. Maybe we don't need grades. Maybe you are apart and separate and you fulfill the functional needs of your department and you don't have grades. I mean, we're writing the SAP here. It's whatever you decide you need and we agree you need and the Board of Selectmen agree you need. Does any member have an opinion on whether or not it should say grade? If it functionally isn't something you need and one does not advance from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3, that's not necessarily a prerequisite. We have job positions, take for example, Schedule A. We have, the facilities directors at grade 8. They didn't move up from junior facilities director in grade 7. So it doesn't necessarily imply upward march. It's just a way to classify. But I think you propose whatever you think you need for your department, and people don't have an issue with it. So how many job descriptions would you be giving us for these 6 different levels? Let's call them 6 different classifications.
I would give you one.
One. And would it distinguish somehow by that credential you spoke about?
Yes, and actually, I'll go backwards a little bit. Anybody that has firefighting credentials would be under one job description, and one that had solely emergency medical credentials would be another. So you'd probably get 2, because there are some responsibilities. If you're not qualified to be a firefighter, you would not be responsible for firefighting activities, and vice versa. So I would see that you're getting minimum of 2 job descriptions.
But with no way for us to, go ahead, Barry.
I'm just going to say, but you then have, I would guess, people who are both firefighters and EMTs.
Yes,
So wouldn't you need a 3rd job description for those?
you are correct. And I'm trying to line it up so that it looks the same way and is laid out the same way as our full-time members. I don't want to reformat or create a whole other set of job descriptions that aren't. I'm trying to create organizational consistency.
Yeah.
So I will work on something that flows better. We just established what even the hiring requirements are for a call member. So it's kind of a work in progress, but I'll submit what's appropriate and then get feedback from this board if they feel they need more.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief. If nobody has anything else, Chief, I guess we'll see you back here on January 27th. We have a
Well,
meeting.
Are we going to speak about Schedule E?
Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry, please. Board, this is pretty straightforward. On page 57, table 3, you have the data. I don't know the last time this stipend was raised. Chief, do you want to speak to your proposal?
I do, and it's relatively short. I know that every town is required to have an emergency management director. I serve that position. Fortunately, the town of Southborough, as a number of their communities, identified an emergency management coordinator, somebody that would do a lot of the operational and logistics support for emergency management. Knowing that the emergency management director holds another position, like myself. I believe when I first got here, there was a budgeted amount of $3,000 stipend for this position. But it was getting $2,000. It had never been updated, and I don't know if I don't believe my predecessor updated it or sought any approval from the personnel board. After almost a year and a half, almost 2 years of evaluation of the position, I feel that's appropriate stipend. Please realize that that position is an employee of the fire department, and often we are supporting the hours and extra pay through our budget for this position. So this is a little bit of giving it a little more shift under the emergency management budget so that the stipend offsets some of our operational costs in our fire department budget. And it's also reflective of the responsibilities the position holds.
Questions, comments for the chief on the stipend?
I think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Would it be your position that this additional compensation was promised to the employee and just somehow never paid out, or?
I don't know if it was promised. There was no official agreement. I know that I think there was an understanding with the previous administration of the fire department that they would try to seek an increase in that. And I think it was submitted in a budget, but never really approved by any board. So we continue to pay what was in the SAP. And again, when I evaluated this at first, I'm like, well, do we really need to increase it? But it's pretty evident that that position has brought a lot more grant money back in the town than that $1,000, and does a lot more work than that $1,000 increase. So I think that's appropriate.
Anybody comments? I'm looking at the table, Chief. You've reported on 11 municipalities, 10 including Southborough. 7 of them, by my count, do not provide compensation for this position.
They don't have that position.
Oh, they don't have the position at all. Not that they don't.
Correct. So that's what, I'm sorry, that's what the no is they don't even have that position.
Great. Well, that's good to know, because it looked bad for you. It looked like 7 of them don't have the position and don't provide it. And I was going to say, Chief, you need some better numbers.
Correct. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And Hudson is a city of, I don't know, but quite a bit larger. So I'm not sure Hudson really is an apt comparison for us. So I would be looking, so they don't have the position. So the question becomes, I don't have a lot of data on towns the size of Southborough, if they have the position, how they're compensating it. So anybody else? All right. Are you looking for us? I'm not really sure, board. I don't think it's appropriate for us to endorse or not. I think we're supposed to hear from the Board of Selectmen first, or I don't know. In other cases, departments have come to us, asked us for our support and to ask questions. And before we vote on something, we always ask if the governing board has approved it. So
It would be helpful to know what the tenor of this board is as I move forward. I have included it in my budget, so it's not something I'll be seeking. I'll be seeking additional funding through the approval process. And in the emergency management budget, it's $1,000.
Yeah.
And it's not an hourly rate. But if there's some general feeling of this board, it does help move this forward.
I really have nothing for comparison. Vanessa, when you were looking back at town reports yesterday, do you know when this stipend was last? Does it look like this?
I don't, but we can quickly figure that out, Brian or I. We're looking at the past budgets that were approved for the fire department. I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years, I think. Brian, do you remember if it was under Pudgy or Joe? I want to say under Pudgy, but I'm not positive.
I know, I want to say Pudgy tried to change it, but he was going to change it.
Yeah, so we can look that up tomorrow morning and get you that data.
So Chief, I apologize. Personnel board, even though on paper we keep personnel files, we don't actually keep personnel files. That is delegated to the personnel director and whoever on his staff. Vanessa or whoever. So I don't have access to these records.
Okay, that's understandable.
Yeah, so once we have these discussions, I have to go back and ask Vanessa. The way it's set up is I have to ask Vanessa, Mark, Brian, whoever, to go back and get me this information. And if we don't get it before the meeting, then it's kind of a, if it were, I don't remember it being changed in the last 4 years. I guess I'm just really conscious of everything I'm hearing about the budget and whether or not this is the year to raise anything. It is not to cast aspersions on the emergency management coordinator or the idea that this position deserves more money. I'm sure that it does, but I just don't know if this is the year that the personnel board wants to start. And the last question I have for you, Chief, I don't think we reached this. Do you have, aside from the stipend, this relates to the first part of the discussion. We don't have here anything about the hours overall that will be worked. Do you have an estimate, a ballpark in your head? If we put in the new Schedule D, how much that costs the taxpayers annually?
Well, I may be missing the question, but it's $1,000. It's annually.
No, I'm sorry. This relates back to the first part of our discussion, not the emergency manager stipend.
Oh.
I forgot to ask you this question on the first part of our discussion. And it was something you and I spoke about.
Oh,
when you were
I'm
first
sorry.
coming forward.
We're-
We represent
we're-
the taxpayers, so it's a question we ask.
We have budgeted $5,000 for this, for changing Schedule D.
Thank you. And that influences me. It's not $50,000, $5,000. I support in principle changing Schedule D.
Right. And I will go forward, I'll work with the town administrator and Vanessa to move this to the select board.
Okay. Any other board members want to say how they feel about Schedule D or E before the chief leaves us?
Yeah, I think I'm certainly on board with changing Schedule D, assuming we see job descriptions that are appropriate, which it sounds like we will. And I'm theoretically in favor of increasing the stipend based on the fact that we have to at some point rely on the judgment of the people who are actually responsible for this, who know a hell of a lot more about it than I can. Just would be helpful to have more context for it, to just provide more support in our mind. But my general leaning would be to defer to those people who are responsible for it. So that would be my feeling.
And
Thank you.
Barry, if I may, it's just all the money that we're trying to get back from the CARES Act, this position, along with a member of Brian's staff, have worked a lot of hours to get money back for the town. So in context, some of it's, we've been paying it out of the fire department budget. Some of it will be reimbursable, but I can legitimately tell you it's money worth spent for what that position, and moving forward, that emergency management coordinator will be responsible for the logistical setup of any mass vaccination clinic and our town plans for any emergency. So I can just assure this board and that it's money well spent for something that we see a lot of dividends back.
I'm 100% on board with the
I am also.
Yeah, I don't see any reason of why we would even delay something like that. I would just say just push it forward.
All right, Chief. Thank you all for your comments.
And
So
thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And I'll forward some information and I will work with the town administrator.
All right, and we will plan to see, hopefully you can get your audience with the Board of Selectmen, and I'll put you on the agenda for January 27th, if that works for you, Chief.
Yeah, if the town administrator thinks we can do that in time, that will work.
Mark has been silent on this discussion. We defer to you, Mark. As part of my pact with Mr. Healy to let you and the Board of Selectmen have what belongs to you. We would not take a final vote until we hear from the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, the agenda for for next week's meeting for the 19th has been set. I'll need to check with the chair whether he wants to amend it to add this or not. If he does, then great, that'll fit into your schedule for your next personnel board meeting. If not, it'd be the first meeting in February for the selectmen, but I'll make that request.
So we have one more meeting scheduled to get this into the SAP, right? Vanessa, we scheduled the 10th, is that correct? Oh,
Sorry, February, yes.
yeah. So Chief, we could see you back here on February 10th, which is our drop dead date for approving changes to the SAP.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the questions.
All right, so if you at least could give us an update for the 27th, we'll put it on the agenda for that. And if we need to reserve time for you on February 10th, we will do that because it's important. And I don't think something of this magnitude, not huge magnitude, I would hate to see this put off for another year.
I appreciate that.
This seems to be the time. I think it's the will of the board. I see nodding that we get this addressed for FY22.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. All right. So we're back to 4B, unfinished business. I put first on our agenda the personnel bylaw for FY21, the current year that we're in. We have a couple of things to take care of. One is 16E, quadrennial review. We've talked about this a few times. What is entailed in a quadrennial review, and have we done what we need to do? So we discussed this back in a year ago. And so this discussion starts at page 27 in your packet, right after the job descriptions. So under 16E, the board has an obligation to review salary schedules, classification schedules. We've been discussing what that would entail. We decided to bring our salary survey for MIPA into that to be proactive, to take a look at if we have any equal pay issues. And that was actually part of our discussion with Tim Norris. Vanessa and I guess working with Kristen and Brian have put together a spreadsheet on a template that was supplied by the Attorney General's office for an equal pay review. And that has been filled out. Thank you to everybody. I don't know who gets the lion's share of the credit, if that's Brian or Kristen Pasicane or Vanessa or all of the above. And that spreadsheet with all the data on what we pay our SAP employees has been or will shortly be forwarded to Mr. Norris for review. So thank you very much to all those who participated in doing that.
I'll just give you a quick update on that if you want.
Sure.
We were actually getting ready to send this to Attorney Norris after we had that call with him last week. And when looking at the data in the spreadsheet, we noticed there were still a few people on there that had retired, like our own administrative assistant in the selectman's office. So we're just, cleaning up some people that left employment most recently, and that should get right over to Attorney Norris, hopefully tomorrow.
So that is what I would call, thank you, Vanessa, our internal review of salaries. So if everyone would open up their SAP to 16E, just so we're all on the same page. 16E says every 4 years, we're going to look at the classification schedule and the salary schedules and the admin policies and stay informed. So we're going to stay informed about what we're paying people in town and whether or not it's consistent with the Equal Pay Act in Massachusetts. We have not done an external survey to look at what other towns are paying the same positions. In your packet at page 29, 30, 31, and 32. This is the last salary study that we had done by a consultant. So if you'll see back in October of 2017, that's when we commissioned GovHR to study the part-time salary schedules. We got that report 2 years later in 2019. But if you look at the second paragraph of page 30, embedded in the part-time study, we were also asking her to analyze and update the salary ranges of grades 1 through 9. So a Schedule A component. This was, I don't think anybody else on the board now was on the board at the time. This was my second month on the board. This was approved and sent over to Joe Ellen. We never really got a report, but if you look in the packet at page 32, I'm sorry, we got a report on Schedule C studies. It didn't include anything on Schedule A. So when I circled back around and I asked Vanessa, Vanessa gave me what is page 32 in your packet. And this was GovHR's report corresponding with the second paragraph. So where we asked her to analyze and update Schedule A salaries, we got back the memo that is on page 32. And why is this important? This board needs to decide whether or not it feels it has discharged its obligations on quadrennial review by reason of this memo. Because if it is discharged, then we don't have to worry about anything more. We're doing an external survey and an internal survey. So my question is, does this suffice? Anybody have any questions about what I'm talking about? Whether or not you think we need to do anything more that we're not doing. We're sending our salaries over to council, and that's really more in terms of equal pay. That's not even in the SAP. We just figured, you all know it. Well, we should look at equal pay while we're doing a salary survey. So does anybody have any questions about 16E and what more, if anything, we need to do? Are you satisfied we have discharged our obligations under 16E? And I should add, we've also reviewed the schedules. We'll review the schedules in terms of the annual adjustment, and we've reviewed schedules D, E, and F. So anybody have any comments on whether or not we have discharged our duty to do a quadrennial review?
No.
I think an argument can be made that we have. I'll put it that way.
I think it's been a pretty difficult year, to the extent that I used to be up at town hall every couple of days, getting information and checking in with people. It's been a little harder to get this all done this year. I will say that. I don't know if anybody feels that there's something glaring that needs to be done. Otherwise, we can move on to our FY22 agenda. I agree with Barry. A case can be made that the board has discharged its review function.
I agree.
All right. So it is I don't think we need to have a motion. It is the sense of the board that we have fulfilled our obligation under 16E. So we'll move on to 4B2. This is part of our review of policies. Ms. Jasinski had asked that we take a look and revise the tuition reimbursement. Oh, I'm sorry. Nope. 4B2 is tuition reimbursement requests for FY21. We're still in FY21. I received no requests for tuition reimbursement for FY21. Ms. Hale, likewise, we conferred and she had not received any. So we were on the agenda to discuss tuition reimbursement requests for this year and none was received. I had sent a follow-up to all SAP employees, an email telling them, I think this was back on October 28th, telling them that the deadline was December 31st, and it came and went without any requests. So that's my update on tuition reimbursement. Comments, questions? All right, now we're on 4C, FY22. All right, so the first item is a continued discussion of our recommendations for the annual town meeting. We're on page 33. All right, so last meeting, we discussed the definition of anniversary date and substituting a definition for start date. You have a proposal on page 36 in your packet. This is my understanding of what the board said last month it wanted to do. Comments or questions?
Yeah, as I thought about this more, I have one general point about this and at least one specific. So the general point is, I'm not sure we need a definition of anniversary date at all. I think we need a definition of start date, but I'm not sure we need a definition of anniversary date. And I might have missed something because and Betsy, you probably pointed this out somewhere that I've forgotten, but the only place I found a mention of this was in 11D, and it doesn't actually use the term anniversary date. It uses, let's see if I can find it. It says each employee shall be entitled to 3 personal days per year to be granted annually on the anniversary of the employees. And I would put in start date there. And then more specifically, I don't think we can say the date 365 days from the start date because of leap years. So it's not just that year, but it's, what you want is if your start date was November 22nd, it's November 22nd of every year. That doesn't change. So for all those reasons, I would just get rid of any definition of an anniversary date. Just go with the definition of start date, and then we may have to substitute start date for some other terms that appear in the SAP, like date of hire.
If you have to do anniversary date, just take out where it says 365 and just write 1 year.
No, I agree with that, but it doesn't, I'm not sure why we need a definition of anniversary date.
I'm with you.
So Barry, thank you very much for your comments. The devil's always in the details. So that's why we talk about it and put it in writing and then talk about it some more. So thank you very much for your astute observations. At one time, going back a year or more, I had run the SAP through Word Search Find to see all the instances of when it used particular terms before we went and changed any. That's on my computer, which is what I'm looking at now. I have a feeling if I go searching for it now, I'll lose this meeting. That's more than my capability. But I would want to run the SAP through the word check and see, because then we'll have to make a corresponding change and have anniversary taken out anywhere that it is. But I support that. So maybe I could just put it in front of the board for next time. We'll take out anniversary date if it's, everybody agrees, Mr. Nixon, Mr. Dietz already agreed. We'll just take out the definition of anniversary date wherever it appears. But I will run the document through a check.
Yeah, and even if you find that it's in there, we can just substitute something like the language that's already in 11D annually on the anniversary of the employee's start date.
Okay. So why don't I do that? We won't vote on this today. Is it the will of the board that we'll take out the definition of anniversary date wherever it appears in the SAP and substitute where appropriate start date?
Yes.
And everybody good with this definition of start date, the first day of employment with the town?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I've asked our administrators and Brian to take a look at this before. Do you have any issues with the most recent proposal?
No, I'm fine with anything that can be done to simplify the document. I'm in favor of, and Barry's made a pretty compelling argument, to do that. I think that's fine.
Okay, great. You're nothing if not consistent, Mr. Purple. You've been beating that drum of keeping things simple for a long, long time. So,
Well,
okay.
another 10 years or so, maybe we're going to get on the same page with it. But we'll take the little victories.
The little victories.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And then Mr. Purple had mentioned in passing, but the board hadn't acted on it, adding a definition of benefit accrual date to say that your benefits start on your start date, but the board hadn't taken any action on that. Is it felt that that's necessary to have a benefit accrual date, which will just say your benefits start on your start date? Is that kind of an obvious thing in
Seems
HR
pretty
world?
logical.
All right.
I don't know that I asked for that, but
Oh, I recorded you as asking for it. All right. So it's felt that it's not needed.
I would defer to Brian on that if he thought it'd be beneficial. He's saying no. So if you have me in the minutes as that being my idea, I retract.
All right, very good. All right, moving on page 33, new or changed positions. I thought this section was kind of funky. Did anyone have a chance to take a look at that? Agree, disagree? All right.
No.
I just didn't understand the second clause of section 3. No new position shall be established. I get that. Nor the duties of an existing position so changed, which really sounds to me like you're reclassifying a position. But if anybody doesn't have a strong feeling about it, we've got a lot to get through. We can fix it for the year after. I'm not understanding how section 3 and 4 have bedeviled me since I joined the board.
Yeah,
All
I think that's been a constant issue for us, but I would suggest we move on for now.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for your comment. Section 9, new personnel hiring. We had a discussion about deleting the requirement of pre-employment physical. No action was taken for FY22, and that's how it will stand. All right, section 11, employee benefits. We had a discussion you're all familiar with Mr. Malinowski. Sorry, that's my second item. The first item was to clarify how these provisions apply to full and part-time employees. And you'll recall at the last meeting, we went through these provisions section by section, and I've put that in the packet for you at pages 37 through 40. So if you could turn to 37 through 40, these are changes. Oh, they didn't come out in red and green. Sorry, again, this is relates to scanning and the interaction with the clerk's office. So what I had done is,
No, they did come out in red and green, Betsy.
oh, I didn't get green on my copy.
The one, if you're looking at the one that's online that was posted, it is green and red.
And the packet had green and red as well.
Excellent. Well, mine came out a little differently. So it's always interesting. All right. So the first thing, all right. So the first thing we have is some green revisions. Thank you for that, Mark. We can all see them. And that was just to conform each section to say full-time employee in the same way. Some of them said regular full-time employee, some, I don't know. So I conformed them, and this is what we all agreed the different sections should apply to full-time, part-time. But then when I was looking at this, I saw some things that I had either noted in the past or other members had noted ought to be changed. So let's just go through this section by section. 11A will now read, full-time employees shall receive. And we lined out each eligible. That works for everybody? Section B, the approved change. I don't think there was any approved. Yeah, it said regular full-time employees. So now we'll scratch regular and it'll say full-time. I made some changes that I'd like to discuss to the vacation schedule. So you can see I added a title, vacation accrual schedule. I added a column to show how many weeks corresponding to the hours. I always get confused by this. And then something that came up last year or the year before was our schedule read 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 10 to 15. And we had an issue that came up. Well, what happens with an employee who's a couple of days past 5 years? Are they 2 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation? And we heard testimony from a department head that the custom in Southborough is when you hit 5 years and you go to 5 years and 1 day, you're now bumped up a notch. So we really didn't have a schedule that covered that. So I changed this. I proposed that we change the schedule to say 0 to 5, 5 plus to 10, 10 plus to 15, and 15 plus. Does that make sense to everybody? And is that something, do you support the changes in 11B? Does that look good? Comments?
I don't have a comment about that part. I do have a comment about the third column.
Sure, go ahead. The whole table up for grabs. Go ahead.
The question I have there is that, let's say you have someone who leaves employment after 6 months in a year. Could they make the argument, based on this table, that they're still entitled to 2 weeks vacation pay? Recognizing that certainly under the hours earned per month, they're not. But could someone say, well, it says if I've worked more than 5 years, I get 3 weeks, even though I didn't complete that whole year. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's what I think. I'm not that smart, but I think that's what we did when we had an employee who had reached, I don't know if it was 5 years and 2 weeks, and we gave them 3 weeks. We said, you're now entitled to 3 weeks vacation. But it didn't mean they accrued it at that time. It meant that they went up a level in the schedule and that they were entitled to accrue that third week over the year.
Right. What I'm saying is, are you creating an expectation in someone's mind so they could claim that as soon as they get the whatever category it is, regardless of how many hours they've worked to accrue it, they're entitled to the full 3 weeks. So again, if we take the 5+, instead of someone earning 60 hours, if they leave after 6 months, they're entitled, they'd argue, the third column says, I get 3 weeks. I get 120.
I see. I was just trying to solve two problems, Barry. One is when I look at this table and it doesn't have weeks in it, I have to stop and do math. So I think I just want to clarify what column 2 says. All right. And we had an issue in column 1, and I wanted to clarify that. But I understand what you're saying. Vanessa, did you have a comment?
I wondered if it would clarify anything or streamline it, Mr. Rubenstein, if we said completion of X years, or do you think that would help at all?
Yeah, it will. I guess it's just the lawyer in me.
I know, I appreciate that point of view.
Well, that's why we hired you to work on the SAP, Barry, because you're a lawyer. I don't know. Which problem should we solve this year?
Well, certainly I'm all in favor of the first column changes. I think that clarifies it. And I'm in favor theoretically of doing what you're trying to do. I'm just concerned about exposing the town to someone's, to a claim.
Which would have a financial cost.
Right.
For paying out, right.
So Barry, do we resolve your issue if we take out column 3?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And are the other members in favor of the clarification in column 1?
What would be the ramification if you changed instead of 0 to 5 and you made it 1 to 5?
Because then that would be, you'd have to get over a year of
To use anything?
service where you're starting to accrue vacation starting.
And we let people use their paid leave as they earn it in that first year of employment. You know, we don't make them wait, 9 months or 12 months to, take a week off, which occurs in other places.
Oh, so you're saying some people have to bank a year of employment before they're entitled to vacation?
Correct. That's very
We
true.
grant
Yes.
the vacation. Barry, I understand your issue. It seems silly to me that I can't somehow translate hours into weeks for convenience.
Maybe if you put in parentheses at the top after where it says vacation earned per year, just put pro rata.
Yeah, because they're earning, a total of, and it would be prorated if it were less than meeting that year.
Right. Then you could point to it and there's already an argument that if someone made the claim that I made, it's inconsistent with the middle section. But I think to clarify it and make it easy to argue, no, we're saying the same thing, just adding those words gives you sort of the hook to do that.
Any other suggestions, Jay? You're a HR guy. How could we put in the 2 to 5 weeks and make it clearer that it's at the end of the year and it's prorated during the year?
I think you just get rid of column 3 and just write prorated.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Jay.
I say you just do kind of what Barry's saying, just get rid of the third column.
No, that's not what he proposed.
Column 3, right?
Yeah, I proposed adding that for clarity, and Barry proposed that we could put pro rata in parens.
Yeah, everything should always be prorated.
All right. Does that work for you, Dave?
Yes.
I really would like folks to see how much, I don't think the average person who looks at this understands that we're giving 5 weeks of vacation to employees at 15 years. And if we're going to start looking at benefits, it starts with understanding that that's 5 weeks of vacation. So I would like that to stay in there. Are you with me that far? All right. So pro rata, take care of it. All right.
So
All right. So next page, page 38. This is one of my homegrown recommendations, that paragraph 11B2 should go. I've never understood why we give, I understand in the past we gave preference to employees with municipal experience, but through my years on the board, I've heard testimony that job knowledge is just as important from the private sector. So I throw out for discussion getting rid of the vacation preferential treatment for municipal employees.
100% agree.
Thank you, Jay. This is something we've talked about before.
Yeah, that came in, quite a number of years ago. In fact, I think it was from Brian's predecessor. So that goes back quite a few years now. I certainly understand the board's point of view here. It is something we talk about a lot when we're recruiting employees. So it sort of ties into getting someone to accept our offer. 2 weeks vacation, was not a lot, but that's why we've used the 3-week rule when it's been applicable to people coming from municipal service.
Alternately, you could talk about giving if you think preference is needed, we should change the vacations. Well, 2 ways to do it. You could just give people more vacation, or you could give people with prior experience anywhere more vacation. So I guess the alternative to what I've proposed is you can put the preference back in there, but it should be people entering into the position from a similar position, not just from a municipality.
Not just, I see.
Yeah.
If you're looking at it from like a Mass Equal Pay Act thing too as well, right? Why is one person who's the exact same qualifications as another person getting a different package?
I would certainly agree with your points. It's more, I think, important to Brian and Mark and I, as long as they agree with me, they can speak up, that it's hard to recruit people, especially department heads, when we're only offering them 2 weeks vacation a year. So the 3 weeks is much more important to us than where someone is coming from.
That's also saying that people coming from non-municipal are fine with 2 weeks as well, which they're probably not,
Agreed.
right? I mean, what's the difference? You got to pay them equally. You're going to offer one person one job, the other person has the same qualifications. If you're going to hire them and give them the same package for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Dietz. Yeah, one thing that I've heard throughout my tenure on the board is a feeling from longtime employees that they get prejudiced vis-a-vis new hires in salary and in benefits. How does it feel to someone who's labored under our system for 4 years, still has 2 weeks vacation, to find out somebody else got hired and was offered 3 weeks vacation because they came from the private sector? So it's never made any sense to me. So I would like to act on it. We could do one of 2 ways. The option that I've proposed here to take it out entirely, or to give vacation preference, but to everybody who has previous experience. So if you want to mull it over, like I said, Rome isn't built in a day. If folks want to think about this because you haven't thought about this in a focused way, and I would like to hear from Mark and Vanessa. Oh, sorry, Mark just stepped out. If this you think is going to present some huge problem in hiring.
Would you want to, excuse me, I just want to interrupt.
No,
Those
please.
those points are very valid, but would you want to have some type of option for the board to consider exceptions? As an out, because it is an effective recruiting tool in certain cases. So I just think eventually it may come back to bite us in some type of instance. I don't know if Mark and Vanessa agree with that, but.
So Brian, on my end, I would rather not change everybody's vacation schedule. I'd rather just figure out how much they would earn per year on a weekly basis. And let's say, yeah, they earn $3,000 a week. If you break it all out, give them a sign-on bonus for $3,600. After the taxes, they're going to have that extra money and they can take a week unpaid, but they're technically already paid for it. It's
another approach. Yep.
Giving everybody the same vacation schedule. Because the last thing you want to do is have one employee talk to another and say, hey, I got 3 weeks vacation. And then they're thinking, what the hell? I just started. I have the same experience as you, maybe even more. And I only got 2 weeks experience. That's going to not go over well if you have people talking about being able to get more vacation negotiating wise.
I think
Well,
our
then
concern is, oh,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Vanessa. No.
is, when, and I'm not trying to sort of pit one classification of employees against another, but when we're recruiting, a senior, like we are right now, in IT manager, that's a senior level person that works a lot of nights and is called in, at all kinds of hours to handle emergencies, and only offering them 2 weeks vacation, has been problematic in recruiting top level people.
Would you guys ever consider, because companies don't offer anybody 2 weeks anymore. It's just, 2 weeks is just not enough. It doesn't attract anybody, even kids out of school, it doesn't attract them. Would you guys ever just consider just starting everybody at 3 weeks no matter what? It would just alleviate all your problems. Besides the fact that you got to pay everybody an extra week of vacation, but
Yeah, then it ties into sort of the, the buyout of, accumulated vacation that, is also, a separate conversation. But I think the town administrator also had something to chime in on.
Well, I think my original chime has gone past, but I don't disagree. I don't disagree with your point, Jay, in terms of some consistency. And, there's been times, for example, when you look at comparable rates and everything when it comes to, say, union contracts. And it's like, the rates that we were paying in step one no longer, really are starting rates anywhere. So basically step one is eliminated and step two becomes the new step one type of thing. So if we're finding that in order to be competitive, because again, and I will say, Vanessa does an extremely, I don't know, she's got a really high success rate of closing the deal with prospective candidates for positions with the packages that we have in terms of, if you look at salary, you look at, benefits and everything in that. I know we may have more than some people in depending on who you talk to in certain areas and that, but we rely on quality of life quite a bit, when it comes to what makes us different, from other people. It's the kind of organization we have. It may be how close you are, commuting time, those are big deals. So I think that to try and make sure that we don't restrict our latitude in trying to put something together that makes us maybe more attractive than some other community that may be, in the discussion for this potential employee. And I don't think that we should, to Jay's point, I don't think that we should have, differences between, if you've got municipal experience, it may be comparable, it may be more, from private sector or some other source that, is beneficial to us, there should be some level of recognition of that, not simply because you did, 7 years of municipal experience, that may, maybe not mean as much as something else. So I would agree with something along the lines of comparable.
I'm not sure I understand. So Mark, are you saying you would support if we left this in to give you the flexibility to give a valued hire 3 weeks, but took out the limitation that it's from a municipality?
Yes.
So let me make a suggestion. We still have a lot to get through. I don't want to spend we could talk about this all day. These are all good ideas. What I would do for the next meeting, I think I will amend my proposal to take out municipality, keep in the preferential treatment, and then have a discussion about that as part of a bigger discussion about vacation leave that we need to have for FY23. How does that sound? So you'll see this again in front of you. It'll put the section back in for the preference. I agree with Jay, this needs attention. It's probably not even appropriate to be doing it. But if we're going to do it, give the preference to people who have experience from any walk of life. Does that make sense? And discuss the rest of how we should change vacation as part of the global discussion that we're going to have. Right after we get these town meeting changes sewn up for this year, we will begin to have a discussion about benefits for the next year.
And to this point further, I just don't see how you can differentiate it. Is it say, all right, if this job's been open over, let's say, 8 weeks, is that constituted as saying it's a hard to fill job, now it automatically jumps to 3 weeks vacation? I think it should just be a set thing. It's either they get 2 weeks or they get 3 weeks, regardless of how long it takes to fill the job. You can't really use that as a negotiating point because it's not fair. So if the person that was in that same role, let's say there's 2 exact same people, if the other person, the circumstances just lined up, so he only gets 2 weeks, but the other person's doesn't line up and he gets 3 weeks, how is that fair?
So Jay, are you advocating then resetting the schedule to start at 3 weeks?
I think everybody should get 3 weeks regardless, but I think if you're going to offer somebody a job, you can't use a vacation week as a negotiator. It's either everybody gets it regardless of when you hire this person and how hard it is, or nobody gets it.
So 2 points. Jay, something's going on with your microphone where it sounds a little like you're coming through some kind of interference when you speak. And second of all, I agree with you. I don't think it's fair, but I don't think we have the bandwidth to make everything in the SAP consistent and fair with modern practice between now and mid-February. I totally support what you're saying, but I think there's only so much this board can reasonably do to bring the SAP into the modern era. There are other things we have to get to. So would you be able to support fixing vacation leave as part of a global plan for the following year?
Yeah, I mean, and also, it's not that we have to, yes, we have to change it in the SAP, but we could just all make an agreement too and just say, let's just not use it as a negotiating point regardless. And when the SAP gets changed, it'll be in there.
Well, the issue that comes to mind with starting at 3 weeks is that has a financial cost to the town that needs to be quantified, that this board, I don't think, we may have the authority on the SAP, but we're going to go to town meeting and somebody's going to ask us in these troubled financial times, if we try to make that change this year, what is this costing the town?
I'm not saying change it now. I'm not saying change it in 3 weeks. What I'm saying is don't use an extra week as a negotiating point because a job is harder to fill than another one or takes longer.
All right, point taken.
When you open the job, you either get 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Make that determination when you're going to make a hire, but you don't use it as a negotiating point down the road.
So
it's either they're going to get 2 weeks or they're going to get 3 weeks.
So that's a good question, Mark and Vanessa. When you open an ad, given that you have this here, do you say 3 weeks vacation or 2 weeks? Or do you use it as a negotiation?
We don't put that in a job posting.
Okay.
But
All
I
right.
also, Jay's suggestion earlier of at the time sign on with a new applicant to be able to offer them the value of a third week when you're hiring them, as opposed to granting a 3-week vacation. There's definitely merit to that approach.
They can take a week off unpaid, but technically they already got it paid. So they get the sign. But
As
Okay,
I-
but, I mean, not to belabor this, but that only helps them for the first year.
Right.
If they have to wait 5 years to get another week, you've only gotten them through the first year. And I guess I feel a little differently about this. I mean, you give people different salaries based on the experience that they have. The starting salary is going to vary. To me, vacation, benefits, salary. I mean, obviously you can't do much with certain benefits, but time off is part of the package. And it seems to me, if it's appropriate, you should be able to offer someone something that's more commensurate with what they've been earning. I mean, if I'm going from a job where I'm getting a month's vacation and I'm looking at another job and it's going to be 5 years before I even get 3 weeks, that's going to impact me just as the amount of compensation is going to impact me. So I guess I just feel a little, I think I would feel the town does need some flexibility, although I would agree that it should be across the board. It shouldn't be limited to municipal or government experience.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to move on. I will have a revised 11B2 for our next meeting. Thank
Madam
you very
Chair, can
much.
I just ask Barry one question before we move on? Just
Certainly.
one quick question. Barry, would you, what are your thoughts on, and I know that this is in other communities, but mostly town manager communities. When someone comes in for a position, if Vanessa were to come in and apply again for her position, and she's coming in with 20 years experience, in the profession, not just from the community she's been in, oftentimes that's taken into account as to where you set the salary schedule exactly for what you're saying. People are coming in, they may have been in a position, they were at 4 weeks and the cap we can offer is 3. I'm not sure whether, you think it would be appropriate that when you're looking at setting someone's vacation, it's based on, the experience that they're bringing, to the table. You're not just limiting it to the 3 weeks. So if I'm coming in with 20, if Vanessa was coming in with 20 years of experience, should that be factored into how you set the vacation rather than just a third week?
So are you saying that we should think about whether even having the 3-week cap gives the town sufficient flexibility? Is that what you're asking?
Right. So if Vanessa's in a position, she's coming in, she was at 4 weeks, and when coming in under the existing bylaw at this point, I can offer you 2, and based on your experience, I could probably get you 3, but it already puts me in the hole of the hiring process that, if the salary is fairly close and everything else being equal, she's not going to make that much more money, but she's going to lose a week's vacation right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, again, my mindset is private sector. If you're hiring senior people, you're pretty flexible on that kind of thing. And the policies generally allow that, where you can, because you're hiring a head of a division or something, and you're not going to give them 2 weeks vacation. Those are people who are used to getting 5 or more weeks vacation.
Right.
So you do what you have to do, but ultimately it's a policy decision that the town has to make, whether, how much flexibility you really want to allow. And I mean, an argument could be made that where you have a structure like the personnel board that has to sign off on it, that's sort of a check on managers just going out and offering, whatever
Right.
they want to induce someone. So, when you have that kind of structure, I could see where you might want to allow more flexibility.
Yeah.
But
And
again, that's a
Betsy, I apologize for taking us further off the beaten path, but I would have forgotten by the time we got to the next meeting. And
No,
I
that's
just wanted
fine,
to
Martin.
close that
Thank
out.
you. It's important, and thank you, Barry. Your input is very useful. I wish we could give all of these topics the attention they deserve. I would like to move on, but I would like to take a 1-minute break if that's okay with everybody, and I'll be back here in a minute. Thanks.
I actually have a hard stop at 2:00, so by the time she gets back, I'm going to be done.
Jay, I thought you were going to jump into a paid lump sum paid time off. I thought that's the road you were going down, combining sick and vacation.
It's actually more beneficial for companies to give unlimited time off.
I know.
Yeah, he said that. Yeah.
That's the way most biotech companies are going now.
Yeah, municipal, local government
'Cause
is
you
much
never
slower.
have to pay anybody out.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right, if we're going to take a minute break, it doesn't make sense for me to jump into the next topic.
Okay.
Of anything else on it.
Well, thank you.
All right, so I'll jump off and I will see everybody in February timeframe.
Take care.
Okay.
Did we lose somebody?
Yes,
Jay?
Jay.
Oh, that's a problem. I don't think we can vote a budget or an annual adjustment. All right, well, we'll wait till Mark comes back. That's going to be a little bit of an issue. Did he discuss whether or not he would be available to come back or
No, he just said he had a hard stop.
stop at 2?
Sure.
Gotcha. So what occurs to me is we probably shouldn't do because then the three of us would have to agree. We can't take any action unless we have a majority of the board members, not the members present. But I do know that Brian has been waiting patiently for us to announce a salary adjustment for SAP employees and also to do our budget. So maybe the best thing is to have another meeting in a couple of days and hope we can get Jay and Dorian on board.
I think it would be okay for us, for the board to vote on January 27th on those things, Betsy. Brian will be back in just a minute.
Okay, sounds
Because
good, Vanessa, thanks.
The selectmen are meeting January 19th, and there's no formal budget presentation that night. We're always, the time of year we talk about the budget, of course, at every meeting, but that would be more important for their first meeting in February.
Gotcha.
But I'll make sure Brian agrees when he comes back.
Great. I literally left for 1 minute and lost a member, so.
Betsy took a little break. So I just wanted out real quick and yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I left for 1 minute and we lost a member.
Don't take it personal.
Don't read too much into that.
I even shower for these meetings. Why are people leaving? So as you know, under the bylaw, we need a majority of the members of the board, so that's 3, to take any action. We can't rely on a majority of the members present. So for that reason, if we could, I think I would delay further discussion until we can get Ms. Jasinski and Mr. Nixon back. So my question for Mr. Ballantyne, this board scheduled a meeting for January 27th. If we discuss the annual salary adjustment, the raises, and the personnel board budget, is that going to be soon enough? Or would you want me to try to schedule a meeting in a week's time?
No, I think I ideally, yeah, it would be sooner, but I think that's fine. That's fine if that's like a drop dead date.
Okay.
But we can make it work as long as that's it.
Well, Yeah, I really don't want to have a discussion about SAP raises with just 3 members. I think we could just take a look at the budget and get a sense from the members present. And then what I would do, Brian, is I will put annual adjustment and budget at the top of my meeting for the 27th.
Perfect, thank you.
Above everybody, because you are waiting patiently. So folks, if you could just, while we have Brian and Mark and Vanessa here, turn to page 54 and 55 in your packets. 54 is our current budget for FY21. And then I just took the liberty of marking it up with some ideas for FY22. And I basically took Brian's budget that he gives us every year and I added a column. Because if you look on page 54, you see the FY21 request and the FY20 request, but you don't see the FY20 actual because it's older. So if you look on my document, you'll see FY20 request, and I added in, with help from the town accountant, what our FY20 actual was, because I think that's helpful. So if we look on page 55, tuition reimbursement for this year, we asked for 5,000. It was an odd year. I don't know how to take the information that I have that nobody applied for tuition reimbursement for this year. I guess we would just chalk it up to COVID and start all over again next year.
I think it's just cycles. I mean, it wasn't used for a long time. And
Okay.
then you had your spurts, and maybe you're just in another down thing, but I think you probably, to be consistent, should make sure it's some things at least there.
All right. So for this draft proposal, I left it at 5,000. So, and we have no salaries. And then on consulting and professional services, you can see the history. FY 2019, it was 3,700. In FY 2020, it was 3,600. And that was the online management portal. Our request went up considerably for FY 21. I don't know where we're going to fall out, but that was for a quadrennial review and Tim Norris legal opinion, and also included the Clear Company applicant tracking system. So I've proposed 5,000 for FY 22. It's just a figure I'm throwing out there. So you can take the 13,000 we have this year, and Tim assures us that whatever he's going to do in terms of review will be done by June. So this would not include any quadrennial review consulting. And the proposal was made to the board to freeze the applicant tracking system. So with the applicant tracking system gone and quadrennial review out of the way, I put in a figure of 5,000 for consulting and professional services. So back down to a more reasonable amount. Employee development, I left at 3,000. Office supplies, in FY20, we asked for 500 and we spent 89. We asked for 500 again, and I spoke with Vanessa. We're not spending nearly that amount. So for office supplies, I cut it down to $150, which I'll split with Vanessa. She can give me pay for one of my toner cartridges and whatever else, because I do a lot from home now because of COVID. And then dues and memberships, we've been running at 0. But something we had discussed as a board was it might be nice for 1 or 2 of us to go to one of these MMA functions at some point. I know I personally could gain some professional expertise, and I was looking at that when COVID hit. So that just brought us down to something more reasonable, and I just wanted to throw that out there and get a sense of the board, of the members present. If this is something that looks reasonable, we can take it up with the full board. And also to just throw this out to Mark and Brian, our finance team, and see if that seems reasonable to you, given what you guys are looking at for the big picture.
So moved. Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, from a budgetary point of view, I think we're really taking a look at what things can be cut down, which don't, specifically address any one budget, things like benefits, things like state charges and assessments, retirement, things like that. And trying to get that number down as low as we can before we start picking away at some of these budgets, which are getting pretty bare bones as it is. So I think what you're proposing is appropriate.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Brian, yes.
Yes, I'll just echo what Mark says. I think it's fine.
Great. Thank you for that direction, gentlemen. Members of the board, if you have anything you want to add, if there's something you'd like to see me beef up or cut, does this seem reasonable?
Looks reasonable to me. What actually strikes me is that at least in the last 2 fiscal years, we've spent less than half of the amount we budgeted. This is what we're asking for, which is a significant cut from last year. It's a little more than we've actually spent. So I'd be in favor of it.
Thank you. Vanessa, did you have something to add? Yes.
Yep. I just wanted to get some feedback from the board relative to employee training in FY22. If you were looking for us to focus on any particular area, because that would sort of lend itself to funding discussions.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think at this point, given COVID and uncertainty about so many things, I would like to look at what we've done in the past, put a reasonable figure on there, and probably talk about employee training for FY22 after we put the SAP to bed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
What you're proposing, figuring out what you want to train on and formulating your budget makes perfect sense in a rational world. But right, if you had told me that no one was applying for tuition reimbursement funds, so right there, we're returning $5,000 to the town treasury, unless something extraordinary happens and someone comes to us and we decide to, change the deadline for this year. But if nothing comes forward, then we're already returning $5,000. So we can feel good about that. Do we get a star, Brian, if we return $5,000 to the treasury?
There are stars here. Yeah, sure.
Okay, a little something by our ledger book. All right, unless there's something that somebody feels they really do want to discuss, I think, I don't know, do you want to keep going through? We still haven't gotten to Mark and Vanessa's list of SAP changes that they gave me a month ago. Do you want to keep, is it fruitful to have the discussion, or do you want to continue on the 27th?
Well, I guess I would just ask the board members if there was anything on the chart that Mark and I prepared that you had a question about, and we could maybe do any needed additional research before the 27th if necessary.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Vanessa. So we're looking at page 43 in your packet. This is Mark and Vanessa's list. So anniversary date, I think we've already addressed that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, I guess this is where I got that you thought we should have a benefit eligible date because it's on your spreadsheet.
Yeah. So maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think, overall, I think some of the things on this list probably coincided. There's some overlap with some of the things you've already done. So I don't know if it's beneficial for us to go through rather than us go through and say, oh yeah, we've already done it. Okay, we've addressed this. Do you want us to go through and pull out the things that are redundant or do you want to move through the list?
If Dave and Barry have 6 minutes, I think we can just go through them right now and then we'll be done.
Sure.
All
Okay.
right. We've taken care of the anniversary date. Mark, Vanessa, to your satisfaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, we've taken care of benefit eligible date. Section 5 is job descriptions. So this says you're looking for us to decide if we approve them or receive them, right?
Yes.
So right now, section 5 says personnel board maintains written job descriptions. Doesn't say we have to approve them. I don't know what maintains means. implicit in that would be that we approve them, right?
It's just the language is a little squirrely, and I know that, we try to make things a little more black and white so that
Yep.
we can be consistent. So your opinion as chair may be that you do one thing and then someone else becomes chair or whatever, and then says, well, we do it this way. So it's just trying to clear up most of these are just cleanup issues and consistency issues.
All right. So I would put that on our list for next week, for 2 weeks, to discuss with the board whether or not they want to specify that job descriptions have to be approved by personnel.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Section A, 7A. 7A, every employee, insert 7-1, not 12, 1 year from date. So where are we? What line are we on? We're on your 7A.
The end of the second line, beginning of the third.
Except as may be authorized, not to include one.
The end of the sentence before that, I think they're referring to.
Yes,
Oh.
1 year from the date of her latest increase.
But that's still what it is because they'll all be on July 1st. Hello? Vanessa has frozen. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Vanessa has frozen. Oh. So I'm thinking that 1 year from the date of his or her latest increase, it'll just be July 1st for everybody.
Correct.
So we could leave that language and it's not inappropriate,
All right.
right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it was more for your consideration, just for consistency purposes.
At this point, if we don't need to do it,
Yep.
given the lateness of the hour, thank you. No, not to, it certainly is appropriate to look at it, but who knows? Another board could go back to dates a different way. 8A, our first and second sentence redundant. 8A, an employee who's promoted to a job with a higher range or rate of pay shall enter it at the rate recommended by the department head. The employee may also receive at the time an increase, provided the maximum for the job is not exceeded. I don't see those as redundant. Vanessa?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, so we're
Okay,
on
good.
8A. The
Okay.
first and second sentences don't seem redundant to me.
So when I was thinking about, well, logistically, what does that mean? I just wasn't sure what the difference was between the first sentence and the second sentence.
All right. An employee who is promoted to a job with a higher range or rate of pay shall enter it at the rate recommended by the department head. The employee may also receive at that time an increase. So one says at the rate recommended by the department head, but it doesn't include that it would be an increase.
So I think the issue is whether or not the second sentence could be inclusive of the first sentence, or are they two separate votes? In other words, if you have an increase, if you've got a rate that's being a person who's promoted to a job with a higher range or rate of pay, and the department head makes a recommendation for that rate could also include an increase, inside of it. Or, are they recommending that an employee be put in at $22 an hour? And then in addition, I'm also looking to, give them a bump, which increases them to 23. Like I said, it seems clunky.
I had a law school professor who used to say, allow me to restate your question a little more gracefully. So Mark and Vanessa, maybe if you want to look at those, you're the folks that uses, we'll allow you to restate it a little more gracefully and just send me the language and I'll include it in. Before our next meeting, I'm going to combine whatever's left on my list with what's on your list.
Sure.
So feel free to get it to me. All right, 9A, pre-employment physicals. Pre-employment physicals, okay, we're done with that.
Yep.
9B has a 6-month reference. we had this discussion with Norris. We decided to leave in probationary period, but remove probationary pay raise.
Yep.
But if you were, as I recall the discussion, there was some, what's the word I want? Some benefit to leaving in reference to a probationary period, but we decided to take the raise out.
Yes.
So did you folks have something else you wanted to add to that?
I guess my only thought was, since the 6-month period isn't tied to a pay raise anymore, did you want to make the review at that period mandatory or just leave it as written? Because nothing would come before the personnel board anymore at 6 months.
It would be great if we had a concrete policy for everything, but I don't think at this point.
That's fine.
I don't think this board has enough of a handle on how reviews are done. That's a bigger topic for another day. So we wanted to leave it in there if the department had in their discretion. We didn't want to say you can't review someone. All we
Okay.
said was they're not going to get a raise. So other board members want to change that, or are we done with that? Are you satisfied with my response, Vanessa? Sorry, I'm going quickly.
Yes. Yes.
All right. 9C. Schedule C has no midpoint column.
No.
Since that's something that you and Mark would be calculating for purposes of making a offer, I don't know that we need to change the table. It's something you guys can calculate pretty readily.
We can. I just didn't know
Yeah.
if that was important to the board.
Just for Schedule C. I don't see it at this time. If operationally you thought it was really important, we could.
I mean, I always run those rates by Kristen and have her double check my math anyways.
All right. I don't see a burning need. Dave, Barry?
No, no.
No,
All right. Section 11, second paragraph. I think, Vanessa, we've addressed this since this list
Yeah.
was done.
Yep.
Mhm.
And also, section 11(2), I2, on the availability of funds. 11(I2), tuition reimbursement. SAP says the town may offer tuition reimbursement. May says to me, maybe yes, maybe no,
Okay.
under a policy enacted under this bylaw. I think may is, I forget what type of word that is, but it's opposite of mandatory, discretionary.
Right.
So I don't see any flaw there. I don't think it says you're going to get tuition reimbursement. So I don't see a need to change it. The suggestion here from Mark and Vanessa is, do we need to look at tuition reimbursement being based on availability of funds? So we would, presumably your recommendation would be that we would add based on availability of funds in there?
Well, if you think that May covers it, and I think what you just said gives me the impression that it does.
Yeah, if there's no money, May. All right, I'm good with
Let's not
May.
make it any more clunky if we don't have to. So no, I'm fine with that. Again, this is just, these are more suggestions of things at least to think about and consider. And if we think that we're fine and we understand everything the same way, then I think there's no reason to change it.
Thank you. And I appreciate the effort, and I don't want to give short shrift to your
No, that's fine.
recommendation. So 14B, we are drawn to the fact that the 10% compensation for an acting has not been altered in many years. My personal feeling is now is not the time to talk about raising any wages that anyone isn't complaining about.
Okay.
Because everything we do is going to have a price tag that's going to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. But please feel free to make a note to bring it up again when we're flush with cash. 17B. Employees and Personnel Board. Okay, to facilitate this, if an employee should feel aggrieved by operation of any provision of the plan, the employee shall first discuss the matter with the department head in a mutual effort to clear up any problem or misunderstanding. And Mark and Vanessa are asking, if it is a department head, do you want to add a clause to refer it to the TA? Has this been operationally been an issue for you guys?
It has not, but it was another one of those cases.
No.
We thought the language was a little odd, that if it was the department head that had the issue of concern, who do they go to?
Well, again, you got the issue of department heads like Ryan Donovan, who's
Who
outside.
has the board?
Who
Yeah,
would they report to? If it hasn't been an issue, I would tend to leave
it
it.
has not.
You let us know when it becomes an operational issue.
Okay.
All right.
The only problem is, Beth, I don't disagree with you, but the only problem is every time we say, well, if it's not an issue, won't do anything, it damn well becomes an issue. And then
Oh, all
we're like, well,
Or as my kids would say, wait, when I say, oh, isn't it nice? We haven't had a snowstorm in a while.
Yeah.
My kids will say, way to jinx it, Mom.
this was the whole thing with tuition reimbursement. That hadn't been touched in quite a while. All of a sudden you get tuition reimbursement. You're like, wait a minute, how do we
Yeah.
handle this? What are the dates?
All right.
Yeah.
But then we'd have to decide, well, I can flag this. We can have the discussion next week. And why don't you give me proposed language? Because if it would say something like, in the case of boards within the, in case departments within the jurisdiction of Board of Selectmen, the department head, if they're the aggrieved person, goes to, and then you'd have to deal with the ones outside the jurisdiction. Do you want them to go to their board first?
Well, and maybe, and so I'm going to err on your side on this, Betsy, and say, I don't know whether you want to get into this now, because as I've said before, I think that personnel board, when it comes to instituting things for SAP, what personnel board can do crosses across who appoints you. So if you require something, in my mind, of the employee, it doesn't matter whether they work for an elected person or elected board or an appointed board. So if you determine that if you've got, if you've got a grievance and everything in that it has to be talked with your department head. If it is a department head, they need to come to me as the personnel director first, and then they can go to you, type of thing, rather, but I understand your point, but that's why I think the personnel board has a little bit more teeth here when it comes to something that affects all SAP, because I think you cut across elected and appointed.
But I don't think I have the authority to tell, I'd have to think that through, and I would want to hear from the other board members.
I think it's a process thing. And I see Barry giving it great thought right now too, so.
Oh, yeah, and this gets back to when Marty Healy said to me, the personnel director, when he's acting as town administrator, deals with personnel matters for departments within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, and they have budget consequences. Is it my position, he asked me if it was my position, that the personnel board could tell Mark what to do when he's acting as TA. And we couldn't even really figure out one of the times when Mark is acting on personnel matters as the town administrator, and when is he acting on personnel matters as the personnel director. So we came up with this dichotomy because it works for me. If it's departments within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, go to the Board of Selectmen first. When you've got an elected department, they don't go to Mark.
Yep.
Simple as that.
I'm just trying to find a way to, to bring everything together under, sort of the same roof.
So you'd be saying that we had the authority to tell Ryan Donovan, if he has a grievance, don't come to the personnel board first, as he currently would under 17B. Go to Mark Purple first.
Yes,
You
I
could do
think
that.
you may want to characterize it as the personnel director instead of Mark Purple, but yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
So library, department head, even elected ones. And I just think that's a bigger discussion to have. And if
that's fine. And I know that we're probably past the time of big discussions. So again, it's something we can flag and, work on as time's available.
All right. I'm not going to bring it back for this year. Please put
Yep.
it on your short list for 23.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever had in my 3.5 years, going on 4, my tenure, had a department head come to me aggrieved.
No,
All right. Thank you very well. They will now, as you pointed out.
exactly, right.
All right. Section 20, you have brought up that we need to adjust the ranges for COLA. And that will be on the list along with the annual salary adjustment and as we finish the SAP. So yes, Schedule 20. All right. Schedule A, Health Agent Teen Librarian. What was that?
Just whether we were adding any new titles, but I think we've already had that conversation.
All right. As far as Board of Health, for the time being, the position is that we're not gonna deal with them through the SAP because there is a statute. So that kind of begs the question. We have under Schedule C, a position for Public Health Director under the part-time positions.
Right.
And that person is currently under a contract with the Board of Health. So whether or not that should get an asterisk by it that says they're in the SAP when they don't have a contract. Because that's kind of like the other one we have where, but it's kind of not like the, anyway, I don't think I want to get into this discussion today.
Nope.
I do
Okay.
one additional question about Schedule C.
Let me just
Okay,
finish.
sorry.
So teen librarian is not before us. The status of public health director as an SAP employee, conditionally or out, is a larger discussion, and I can put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
But there's no proposal for a teen librarian this year. I spoke, thanks for bringing it up. I spoke with Mr. Donovan, and that will not be on the agenda this year. They'll take it up next year.
Okay.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
A quick question on nurse. Now that we used to have Leslie that working in both departments, but now we're separating Board of Health nurse and Council on Aging nurse. Do you want to just leave it as a generic title, or does the board feel it's necessary to have that distinction?
I want to leave it for now because there's
Okay.
still some question in my mind that everyone is on the same page about what happened with the public health positions. There was an opinion from town council. We were only this board was only involved in the discussion to the extent action needed to be taken under the SAP. A solution was found outside the SAP, but my legal opinion differs somewhat from town council's legal opinion. And I think given that the needs of the Board of Health are being attended to, and it is largely a budget issue, and we're not going through the SAP,
Okay.
maybe we could wait and deal with that next year.
Okay, great.
Because there is a larger issue of the status of public health employees under that statute that I
Yes.
don't think this board needs to focus on now.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I could talk about it till 4 o'clock,
Yeah.
but I don't think anybody else wants to. All right. Interns. I don't think we're going to get to interns this
No.
year either. I appreciate that you brought it up. I think it's a long-term discussion. Thanks for the memo, and it'll be on the short list for 23.
Okay.
23.
Yep.
I don't see it right now. There's 3 departments that have, sorry to skip through this. I'm not even asking anyone. On the matter of interns, gentlemen, Vanessa's survey showed that there are 3 departments who currently employ interns. One is the Board of Health. Again, as we've discussed, they have a statute that allows them to manage. So it's really 2 out of the SAP departments that have interns. And I don't think it's a big enough of an issue for us to worry about it this year, but it's certainly something we should talk about for the next year. Does that work for you guys? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going so fast, I'm not letting anybody else get a word in. Vanessa, unless you're the one who studied and brought it up, do you think there's
That's
a critical
fine.
need?
No, it can wait.
All right, thank you. Schedule C, 1 employee continues to be outside the max. You want to tell us what that is?
That's the nurse in the Council on Aging.
Yeah,
Just because of her seniority and longevity, I just wanted to make sure the board was aware she was being paid a rate higher than the maximum published rate.
gotcha. And this came up when I talked to the Board of Health. Because they have a statute and they did their own hiring, but they told us that the rates in the SAP would not cover the public health nurse that they would want to have, that they want to hire. The rate would be much higher than what's
Mhm.
in the SAP. The SAP doesn't work for them, in other words, in terms of their market.
So that was more informational for you.
Yeah, I don't, you've raised with us before the issue of the nurse position being out of range. Maybe that's a discussion for the full board. I don't know. That's the only position that I think right now is,
We can do another sort of quick check with Kristen, just to be sure, but I think that may be the only one outside of range.
I think so.
all right. So maybe you're recommending that we put certain positions into a Schedule B?
I mean, that would be one place to move nurse and create a new range that fits what she's being paid.
All right, I'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay,
And then Schedule F, potential revisions, I think we're all set.
all set. Yep,
All right.
that's it.
So thank you so much for your list. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We will have a new revised list for next week, and we'll take up the annual adjustment in the personnel board budget first. Does anybody have anything else?
No,
No,
Thanks for hanging in there, guys. And we have 2 meetings scheduled, upcoming January 27th and February 10th. So I don't think we need to schedule another meeting at this time. All right, and Mark, we're all set. We're good to get a little bit of Lori's time to type this up the week of the 15th, I think we said.
Yep, soon as you're ready.
All right, great. We just have to get there. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time. Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
kind of rushed through it at the end there.
everybody,
you.
okay. Take care.
Have a
All
good
right.
week. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you in 2
Bye.
weeks. Thanks.
Bye.